So Drekthar, I did a poll not too long ago on my YouTube about what the most powerful card is in the game, what is the card that needs to be nerfed the most, and the two highest by far were Guff, which I might do another video on, but the highest by about 15% voting was Drekthar. So I'm going to talk about why it's a problem, the stats behind it, what I do to change it, and it's not just going to be complaints, it's genuinely like reasons why Drekthar is actually a problem in the game. And the first reason is because of the mulligan win rate and the drawn win rate. It is the highest in both of these categories by a lot, actually. Drawn win rate, the only card that's even close is Celestial Alignment. Actually, also a couple of cards are kind of close as well, but it's still like it's the biggest gap of any of these. Look, 0.3%, 0.1%, 0.1%. This is an entire percent, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but the jump from 3 to 2 is a fourth of the size of the jump from 2 to 1, which is kind of big. Mulligan win rate, it's also more than 5% higher than the next highest card, and it's only kept a portion of the time. It's not even kept that often. It's only kept 60%, whereas this is kept almost every single time that you can. And so if you look at the actual win rate within the deck that it's most prevalent in, which is Naga Demon Hunter, also Quest Hunter, which it's not as popular as Naga Demon Hunter, but still very similar problem. We have the drawn win rate being exceptionally high, a played win rate being high, and the turns held being fairly low. I mean, obviously, because it's a 4 cost and you're keeping it in your mulligan almost every single time, you're going to hold on to it for a couple of turns. But for the most part, it is a card that you have a very high win rate. And the only comparisons that you can make to this card are like, okay, these have high win rates. Other cards have high win rates. Let's look at Handbuff Paladin, another tier 1 deck. If you look at the played win rate for Mr. Smite, it's even higher, right? So that means Mr. Smite must be broken. That's not necessarily true. And the reason why it's so high is because you're only playing it in a position where you're probably going to finish off your opponent. It's like it's the card that you use to win the game. If you're not playing this card, you're probably not winning the game regardless. And you could say, okay, there are other high win rate cards like Shield Shatter, very high mulligan win rate, high drawn win rate, high played win rate. But the thing is, that has a low kept rate, because it's a card that's only kept and played in niche situations. As you can see, it's held for about 3 turns because you want to use it in the correct position, or some matchups you're just not going to use it that often at all. So for the most part, this card is one that only has these high things because it fills a niche purpose. But that's not necessarily the case for Drekthar. The problem with Drekthar is it has these exceptionally high win rates, mulligan win rates, played win rates, despite being a card that you are keeping almost 100% of the time and basically playing as soon as you can every single time. Yes, it says turn played on average is about 5.1. That's because you're not always going to have it in your mulligan. You're basically playing it as soon as you draw it, turn 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, any point in the game. So that's the stats about why Drekthar is a problem. But let's talk about why Drekthar is a problem, like philosophically, in terms of like the game itself. If you play Drekthar in, let's just say, this deck or Quest Hunter, and you get, hypothetically, you get one of the 1/5 taunts, you get one of the you get one Restaurant Viper, and you get one Treasure Guard, right? For 4 mana, the stats you're getting on the board are about 8-13 stats for 4 mana, split amongst 3 different things that all have like 3 or more HP. You can also get something like Pufferfist. Thank you so much for the sub, I'm sorry. And yeah, so you're getting about 8-13 stats turn 4, while also technically drawing, in quotations, because you're not drawing, but thinning your deck by 2 cards. So you're gonna more reliably draw cards that could do damage and win you the game. Not to mention that a card like Treasure Guard and Pufferfist have ongoing effects on the board, like Taunt, also draw a card, or the ability to do extra damage. Same with Lady Steno, and same with Raj if you're using him in Quest Hunter. There's just so much benefit you're getting out of Drekthar on a turn where most classes can't deal with that. Think about it. Priest's Condemn, the 2-mana card that does 1 damage, 2 damage, 3 damage to everything, that doesn't even come online until turn 5, where it does 2 damage, which is still not enough to kill this board. The only decks that can reliably deal with it are Warrior with the Shield Shatter play, which again is why Shield Shatter has such a high win rate when it's kept in the mulligan, because you always keep it against Demon Hunter. I'm just thinking about the different classes here. You could pop off with Nagas and Mage. Occasionally, depending on what cards you have, you can deal with it with Warlock. But basically, everything else kind of just gets overrun by this turn 4 play. And then, that also, you have to take into consideration the fact that Drekthar is supported by a ton of direct damage. Like, Drekthar is your main way of getting board presence, and then both Hunter... So after you take the time to actually deal with Drekthar, like, okay, I just took 8 damage, but I finally killed the board. By turn 6 or 7, you're dying from hand to Quest Hunter and Demon Hunter, which is a different issue. It's not necessarily related to Drekthar, it's just a great complement to the decks that it's in. But the problem is, it's too powerful for the turn it comes out on. Basically, is the general consensus that I have received from people, what I have, you know, noticed personally, and based on like the statistics of him being played immediately and having the highest drawn and played win rate by far, and being in the most decks. Actually, is he in the most decks, or is he? Okay, he's 4th, only behind the most flexible card in the game, the Naga that draws cards that is basically in every deck Drekthar's in, plus Naga Mage, and then Restaurant Viper, which is famously one of the best tech cards to deal with any weapon in the game, whether it be Mithril Rod or the Cariel weapon. So, okay. It's a win condition that is the 4th most popular card in the game, with one of the highest drawn win rates, one of the highest mulligan win rates, one of the highest deck win rates, and it's just... it's a problem. So, how to fix it? Well, there are a couple of different things that I think you could potentially do to actually fix this card. And at the end, I will be going over the chat to see if anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns, so start saying them now. A couple of things that you could do with Drekthar is, 1, lower Drekthar's stats. It might not seem like it's that big of a deal, but if you make him a 4-mana 3/3, there's a lot of 3 damage removal in the game that... Also, another thing that helps Drekthar is just the power creep of the game. Stats are just in general higher. Like, there are a lot more 3-mana 3/4s in the game now. But anyway, moving on. Making him a 3/3 means he dies to things like Drain Soul, which means he dies to things like Bash, which means he dies to things like SI Extortion. You could also go as far as to make himself like a 2/2, like a 4-mana 2/2 that pulls out other cards, so it can die to even more things, like Dragon Bait Shot. Also, there's Quick Shot and Aim Shot. You can do any number of things, right? Frostbite could now kill it if it goes down by 1 to 2 HP. You could even make him a 4/2, so he still has that same aggression, but he's harder or easier to deal with. Warrior's Rancor can do more. Mage can kill it a little bit more reliably. Every single class in the game will be able to deal with Drekthar, and I think that you can still have that power of bringing out a ton of cards, and you might not think lowering his health by 1 or 2 would do a lot, but I cannot tell you how many times I was only able to get Drekthar down to 1 HP and had to kill him the next turn, and because I ended up taking that 4, maybe 8 extra damage, it lost me the game. So lowering his health is a great way to keep him the same flavor basically, not change his ability, not change his mana cost, because that would make things confusing, but it would be really, really good in my opinion. Next thing you could do is you can make him summon 1/1 copies of the minions that he pulls out of the deck, like Barnes does. Barnes is still one of the best cards in the game in Wild, and Drekthar, and he pulls out a 1/1 copy, so Drekthar could pull out 1/1 copies as well, because again, if you pull out a 1/1 copy of the Vanguard, it's still going to get its good effect. The Puffer Fist is still going to get its good effect. The Treasure Guard is still going to get its good effect. Raj, still going to get his good effect. So if you pull out cards with effects, you're still going to get value, but it's not going to be as overwhelming as just like, oh, I randomly summoned 2 Rust-Rot Vipers, now I've got 10, 12 stats on the board for 4 mana. It's going to be like, okay, 6 stats on the board with the ability to have some extra value off of that. And then the last thing that you could do is increase his mana cost and then change the battle cry to just, if this costs more than every minion in your deck, summon 2 3-drop minions or something along those lines. But again, changing the mana cost is really, really hard to do for a card like this, because if you make it 5 mana and you make him not able to summon 4-cost minions, it just kind of doesn't work out. So the mana cost change isn't really good. Or you could honestly maybe lower his mana and make it like a 3-mana 2/2 and make it more restricting. But again, that messes up the whole flavor of the Horde and Alliance, both of them being 4 cost and doing like polar opposite things. So I think lowering his stats or having him pull out lower cost minions, or the last change, which I forgot to mention, is only pulling out 1 minion. So that way, yeah, you pull out like Restaurant Viper and it's 7-8 stats, but it's not as overwhelming and you don't think you're going to just necessarily lose the game immediately. And yes, there are things you can do to answer Drekthar. It just feels really, really, really bad to lose to a card that they coin out turn 3, you don't have an immediate response, you're like, well, I'm taking 10 damage next turn guaranteed, and if I don't deal with it by the next turn, I'm just dead. Like, the problem with this card is it just closes games out way too fast, and if you scale it back a little bit, make it easier to remove, make him do maybe a little bit less damage, or something along those lines, just one of those. You don't need to make him less durable and do less damage. Just make him easier to remove, less durable, or do less damage, because you don't want to completely gut the card. I still want it to be good, because last thing, I think Drekthar is good for the game. It is a strong enough card to where it can punish a control deck for maybe not having immediate removal, or it can punish a greedy deck for not having that ramp or that immediate draw or combo that they needed. So I mean, I think Drekthar needs to exist in the game to speed up the pace, to make sure greedy decks and control decks can sometimes still lose to aggro. But I think in its current state, it's just so powerful that it beats basically everything, and that's when it becomes a problem. But yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to talk about for Drekthar. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.